Bryan Kohberger's attorneys have issued a motion in regard to his whoosh, alibi, and we're going to talk about it in today's video. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. At least the pretend sofa. It's still behind me right back there, pretending to be a sofa. And my name's Paul, and this is our sassy sidekick, Mr. Roscoe P. Coltrane. He wanted to be held today because he's feeling lonely, and I like holding him. What we're going to be talking about today is the Bryan Kohberger case, and we're going to be talking about one specific thing that a lot of you have asked me about, and so I wanted to address it because what I did is I saw the headlines for this and whatnot, and then I read the documents, and I was like, no. We need to discuss this. So what we're going to do, and the way this video is going to go, is we're going to do like a very quick, I'm talking 30-second recap of the case. This video is not meant to be like an overall thing about the case. So we'll just quickly get everybody on the same page, and then we're going to review the document, and I'm going to make commentary along the way. So let's go ahead and just do that quick overview of the case, and then we'll go over the actual documents. So on November 13th in the early morning hours, it is alleged that Bryan Kohberger broke into an off-campus home where several students resided. Now, he is accused of taking the life of 4 of them. Those victims are Ethan, Zaina, Kaylee, and Madison. Bryan was indicted by a grand jury in May on murder and burglary charges in relation to this. Now, these crimes were especially brutal, especially heinous, and seemingly so completely random at the time, for something like this to happen. And it sent absolute fear, as you can imagine, through the locals, but also through the nation. So Bryan's currently incarcerated and awaiting trial. Now, a judge did enter a not guilty plea for him when he chose to remain silent at his arraignment. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the documents and go over them. Now, as I always like to say, you already know if you've been following me, I ain't no doctor, I ain't no lawyer, I ain't none of that fancy credentialed stuff, okay? I'm just a guy with a pretend sofa, a little dog, and some opinions on true crime, and they're just that. They're my opinions on what I think about the cases that we follow and whatnot. So I urge you to do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and we'll talk about them in the comment section. Now, that being said, let's go ahead and get to addition. Now, on the first page of the motions that I have up here, you can just see this is the very beginning here. Plaintiff, State of Idaho versus Bryan Kohberger. Up here in the top left-hand corner, you see Nancy Taylor, Public Defender Office. All this fancy stuff, But, we're just here for the tea, if you will, what the kids like to say. Okay, now let's just start up here. Comes now Bryan Kohberger by and through his attorney of record, Nancy Taylor, Public Defender, and hereby objects to the state's motion to compel motive of defense of alibi, or alternatively to bar certain evidence. So it states here, we're just going to jump down to the second paragraph. Idaho Code 19-519 and ICR 12.1 require an alibi disclosure of a specific location, with a specific location and witness to so testify. By statutory definition, Mr. Kohberger may remain silent, yet testify that he was not at 1122 King Road, November 13th, 2022. However, in an abundance of caution and recognizing the court has authority to exclude witnesses, Mr. Kohberger has indicated he anticipates corroborating witnesses. Okay, so this is very interesting. Now it gets more into like the nuts and bolts of it on this next page we're going to go to. So let's just go on and move to that before we start dishing on it. Okay, so we're going to begin at the very top here. It says Mr. Kohberger has long had a habit of going for drives alone. Often he would go for drives at night. He did so late on November 12th and into November 13th, 2022. Mr. Kohberger is not claiming to be at a specific location at a specific time. At this time, there is not a specific witness to say precisely where Mr. Kohberger was at each moment of the hours between late night November 12th, 2022 and early morning November 13th, 2022. He was out driving during the late night and early morning hours of November 12th through 13th, 2022. Okay, hold on. I've got a few things to say about this little section right here. Now, I'm going to also, if you're new here, are you new here? If you're new here, you'll know I kind of like to just look at both angles of things, right? So reading this first part here, I was like, first of all, let's just say this. When the headlines started coming out about this, and I was like, alibi, I was like, Okay, let's get the perpetrator off the streets, for God's sakes, right? What's his alibi? Now, I'm expecting he's out with Mother Teresa, doing something. You know what I'm saying? Like this kind of level or whatever. Y'all, when I started reading this document and I got into this, I was like, please don't tell me where I think this is headed, right? So that's my bias, okay? Having said that, I will say this. For me personally, I do find driving and going for rides in the car relaxing, meditative, like I need to clear my mind. I get it, right? However, there's a context that's very different, okay? They're trying to sit here and tell me, and again, we haven't even gotten deep into this, that no, he likes going for these rides and stuff like that. And that's what he was doing this night. I'm like, oh, well, isn't that convenient? Also, let's not even get into the other circumstantial evidence, right? Of all this kind of stuff that's just like, are we sure he was just driving around in the car numerous times around a house that happened to have 4 young people brutally murdered in it? Coincidence? I think not. Okay. But I was just like, look, okay, at the end of the day, obviously the defense is going to do what the defense has to do, and they're going to go up against everything they can, right? And so I think some of this is going to come down to obviously fighting things out in court before the trial, but also, creating reasonable doubt, this type thing, of, okay, well, who can say we need witnesses? They're trying to also pull information out. And I think also setting things up for some excuses that they might come up with other types of evidence that are going to align or not align with the alibi. So that being said, let's continue for now. Counsel for Mr. Kohberger is aware that case law broadens the definition of alibi with the statutory requirement of a specific location to more broadly include disclosure of information that tends to state the person claiming alibi was at a place other than the location of an offense. Mr. Kohberger has compiled to the extent possible at this time. Corroboration of Bryan Kohberger not being at 1122 may be brought out through cross-examination of state's witnesses. At this time, Mr. Kohberger cannot be more specific about the possible witnesses and exactly what they will say. The defense has been hampered by the state's own choices. The state chose a secret grand jury rather than the planned preliminary hearing. Had the state moved forward with a preliminary hearing, the defense would have had the opportunity to develop testimony through cross-examination and witness presentation. Instead, the defense has only received on July 27, 2023, so this is like not that long ago, depending on when you're watching it, a copy of the testimony the state chose to elicit. Review of such is underway. The defense had to obtain investigative materials from the state's investigative counterparts, the FBI, through an order compelling the state to provide such materials. The state made draft disclosures just 2 weeks ago. The sufficiency of these disclosures is currently being analyzed. Now, obviously, I think what they're saying here is like, look, y'all need to hurry up and give us this stuff. Like, you have an obligation to, right? And you're not doing so. And I do think that it is frustrating, regardless of the scenario or, who I think is innocent, guilty, whatever. One of the things that makes me nervous with the cases that we watch so often, and I get these are complicated cases, there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of evidence, right? But when I's aren't dotted and T's aren't crossed, because what it makes me nervous of is when we see these scenarios where years later something comes up and a potential, murder or whatnot is let back out because of these little discrepancies. So I am all about full transparency leading up to these, everybody being very transparent with the evidence they have, getting it to everyone in timely manners, this type thing, just so that the wheels of justice can smoothly turn. Okay, let's continue. Now we're going to jump down to the paragraph starting beneath the little, section here that is quoted. So it says the defense acknowledges a vast amount of discovery has been provided. Discovery is received on a nearly weekly basis. Okay, this is good, right? The defense reviews and acts on discovery as quickly as possible, including making appropriate supplemental request for discovery. Last paragraph on this page. The state's motion is an attempt to force the defense to open its work product files and let the state peek inside. I mean, can you blame them? I mean, my God, inquiring minds ought to know. Okay. The defense has stated all that can firmly be stated at this time. This is not trial by ambush from the defense. This is the defense requesting information as quickly as possible, yet in some instances face the delay of requesting a court order to obtain information. The state continually uses those opportunities to attempt to force a waiver of speedy trial. That is a decision left to Mr. Kohberger and Mr. Kohberger alone. Now, again, these are, pretty heavy accusations here, but again, we often see this in the beginning of all these cases that we go over, is this posturing by the state, this posturing by the defense. This is no different here. And they're going to, of course, make things out to be a certain way. I have no doubt that this type of stuff takes place in these cases and whatnot of trying to force one's hand to do this. And of course, people want to get in here and see what, they want to see what you're dealing with. This is how you build your case, right? So, I get it, okay? Let's go on to this next page, though. It says in the beginning, finishing out, Mr. Kohberger is aware of and will comply with his continuing duty to disclose information. The court may exempt Mr. Kohberger from further inquiry. Mr. Kohberger requests such an exception at this time. Continued inquiry at this juncture delves into his case investigation as well as protected work product. In support of an exemption, Mr. Kohberger is prepared to provide further detail in an ex parte hearing with the court. Okay, so here's what I think. Again, I'll just say it one more time. I ain't no lawyer. I ain't, none of this fancy stuff right here. This is just my sofa opinion, right? We're just sitting here talking about this. Okay, so I think obviously they're going to try and come up with an alibi, right? Obviously they're going to be like, he was out driving around. Okay, yeah, he was in his car. We get it. You might have evidence, but can you connect him to whatever? Okay, that's whether I agree with it or not is the defense doing their job. Okay, he already did his thing when he went to court where he was like, I'm not going to speak, and the judge did his plea, right? So he's kind of going along with this. There's some posturing that he has done throughout this, and one thing that throws us off. Let me backtrack here. One thing that throws us off with this is, there is this like Bundy-esque type vibe, but Bryan went down real quick and hard, right? Some of the stuff for him to be this law student and all this stuff where it seems like he was trying to posture himself to have all this, knowledge about how to pull a crime like this off. It wasn't hard to catch him. Okay. Let's just put that out there. So I think that with the defense coming out with this and whatnot, I'm just like, well, yeah, of course, this is like, doesn't surprise me. I do not think they're going to come out with some bombshell information, about his defense. I think it will literally be just that, or his alibi, I should say. I think it will literally be just this, right? That he was driving his car alone, and I think what they're going to do is once they go in, I would be very curious to know for fact what all the evidence is. I know there's been timelines out there of like when a car was seen at this time, but the actual pings and all this kind of like data, right? Pings, GPS, this type stuff. Because again, if the defense can create reasonable doubt to be like, well, no, here's this pattern where he goes and drives around, and he does this all the time, so what's different about this? Or that there was a pattern of him doing that, but I think we already know that there's going to be a pattern of him doing that because it seems like he was stalking this house, right? So it's almost like trying to come up with excuses to stuff. And what this reminds me of too is, how like a lot of these cases we watch where you can just tell the defendant's been in jail for like a really long time and hey, they don't have anything else to do, right? They're bored, okay? So for them to go through and pick apart every little bit of evidence and come up with a reason behind it, you're just like, oh my God, cry me a river. So there's that. Again, I think this is a whole bunch of nothing. I think that this is just more stuff here. But again, I'm not a lawyer. There's some of these big fancy words in here. I don't know what they mean. I ain't trying to pretend like I do, okay? But just from my sofa view, I'm just like, oh no, please. Imagine a jury hearing this. Okay, he goes out and rides around in the car alone. Is that reasonable doubt for me? Now, well, of course, we're not in trial yet, so I don't know. But just this alone, I'm like, yeah, no, that's not going to pass the vibe check. Oh, what else you got? Okay. So that being said, I want to know what I've heard from many of you in email and whatnot about kind of what you think about this and whatnot, but let me know in the comment section. And Mr. Roscoe says if you still are watching, he thanks you kindly, and he does ask that you drop some sofas in the comment section for him. And until we meet down in said comment section to continue the conversation, I'll see y'all there.